Hello, this is Todd Giffen. The date today, it's August 2nd, 2013, and now this is going to be the video of my grandfather, Clyde Giffen. He wants to talk about the police and what they did to me in the assault and basically the framing they did. So he's got many grievances he wants to go over, and we want to get this out to the public. So here is Clyde Giffen, my grandfather, who witnessed the entire event. He was in the room watching the police do this, and he also is the guy that went to the police in the first place, asking for their help.
Yeah, this is Clyde Giffen, and I did. That Sunday morning, I'd gotten out of bed, took a couple of great grandkids to church in Cottage Grove, turned around, came back up here, and the kids had fallen asleep. So I carried one in, I put him to sleep on the couch, went out and picked up the great granddaughter, picked her up, brought her in, and put her in the recliner, and I sat down in the love seat and was sitting there watching television. And Todd come walking out of the bedroom and asked me what those kids were doing there in a kind of a grumpy attitude, and I just told him to quiet down because I didn't need a lot of noise. I didn't want the kids woke up. So I turned around and stood up because he wouldn't silence it, and I doubled up my fist. Well, he grabbed my wrist to keep me from hitting him. Well, about that time my cell phone went off, which it was on vibrate in my pocket. Well, Todd didn't know it had even rang, so I walked into the kitchen and I reached up to take and answer it. And anyway, he grabbed my one wrist where I had my hand on the cell phone, and it dropped back in my pocket. Well, he saw my facial attitude, and so he turned around and he walked away. Which actually I answered the cell phone, and it was my daughter who had taken, or granddaughter I should say, who had taken off and gone over to Eastern Oregon someplace to see some friends. And she was calling, wondering where her kids were, if I was going to bring them home yet. And anyway, I was a little bit disappointed in the way the attitude Todd was, that I walked out, put them in the car, and I scratched my right wrist. I should say my left wrist, while I was buttoning the kids into the car. Well, it turns out that my disappointment, I thought, well, I'll go to the police department and I'll have one of those guys come over and talk to Todd. Got down there, and the one I ran into was Grice, or whatever his name was. Well, he saw a little bit of blood on my arm, which was there from where I scratched myself on putting the kid into the seat. And anyway, just a little bit of blood. So he turns around and he runs his finger through it, and then he wipes it down just below it, and then takes a picture of that. Then he comes over to the house, and
So let me ask you, do you think that the police guy, was he looking for a way to get me for something that he didn't even know what happened? Like, he was just looking for any way that he could attribute that to me for some reason.
That's actually about what it kind of looked like to me too. But anyway, we walked up to the house, and he says, well, my partner's just down the street down here. So, I mean, it didn't make no difference to me where he was. We got up to the house, and he says,
now, let me ask this. Didn't you have a reason for going to the police? Wasn't I complaining about needing medical care that day?
yes, you were wanting some medical care.
Because I alleged I was being tortured by the police and I was badly hurt, right? That's what was going on, right? That day?
Yes. But the thing of it is, I turned around and I got back up here. He asked me, he says, now, can I come in? I said, yeah, fine. Well, Todd had turned around and gone back into the bedroom and locked the door and went to sleep. We got back there and he knocked on the door. Well, Todd didn't answer the door, and about that time his partner snuck in the back door. I didn't realize he was even coming into the house, but anyway, he snuck in the back door, went down through the living room and back around where we were. And I had gone in and picked up a deal to unlock the door, and I unlocked the door. And anyway, as we turned around and went into the room, I figured, well, they were going to talk to him. And anyway, Grice was sitting there talking and questioning Todd, and I don't really know exactly what he was doing, but anyway, I thought they were done talking. So I started to walk out, which actually, about that time I heard Grice say, "Well, Todd, give me your hand, you're under arrest." And I turned around and looked. Well, it turned around and Todd lifted his hand, his right hand, and old Grice reached out, he grabbed the hand, and he turned to his left, which I couldn't figure that out, because that put him into the middle of the bed. But just as he went down to his left, he swung around and he saw me standing behind him. And he dropped Todd, is what it looked like. And Todd went to the foot of the bed, and Grice turned around and looked straight at me, and he said, "Did you see that?" I said, "You bet." But he had the taser in his hand and holding it up against his chest. And there he was, and he kept trying to take my attention off of what was going on across the bed. And his partner had stood there and huffed and puffed and then blew himself across the bed, jumped onto Todd, knocked him down into an 18-inch hole there with his head pinned up against the wall, turned around and hit him in the face with his flashlight, dropping the flashlight. And after that, he had his right hand, his right hand pinned up against where his face was, pinned up there, and then turned around with his own right hand. He hammered Todd as hard as he could, breaking, which actually broke Todd. His nose was broke and his teeth were broke, a couple of teeth. But he left the flashlight down there at the foot of the bed. Well, anyway, they pulled him up out of there.
Tell me, so how many times did you see the police officers hit me?
At least 20 times.
So they were there just pounding me, beating me.
He was just actually hammering down on him like he was just a piece of meat, like he was trying to kill him is what it looked like to me.
Yep.
But anyway, he reached down and he pulled up Todd, his one hand was above his head, and they reached down and pulled up Todd, but about that time old Grice looked at me and he says, "Well, I better go down to the foot and see what's going on." And he leaned over at Todd while Todd was laying on the floor there, and he says, "You better quit your resisting," which actually Todd was not resisting. They allowed this to happen, but Todd wasn't resisting, but they pulled him up out of there and they threw him down on the bed. Well, from what I understand, somebody asked me if Todd had reached for his gun. The answer is no, he did not. Todd didn't even try to hit them. But anyway, they pulled him up and they threw him down on the bed. And while he was on the bed, they walked around casually, grabbed him on the opposite side of the bed, and then drug him off the bed, and his hands were still above his head as they walked out the door. And they got out to the back there, and I was standing on the back porch, and Grice come walking back, and I walked in there to the bedroom to see what was going on in there, and Grice had reached down and picked up the flashlight, which was laying at the foot of the bed. Well, about that time, his partner, Blizetz, or whatever his name was, come walking in, and Grice had tried to hide that flashlight against his pant leg, which was black, and he reached out and he handed it over to Blizetz. And at that point, old Blizetz, they both stood there and gave me a kind of a funny look like, "Oh my God, he saw that." Well, anyway, at that point, they walked out and were standing on the back porch. And I was standing right there as they were talking, and Blizetz's face was all blood spattered. And anyway, they walked on out at that point, but they had taken some pictures of Blizetz, which I've actually got a picture of him taken with the taser. Its colors in black, and it doesn't even come close to looking like the picture that was taken by their camera. They took it with a camera too, only this time they had taken their finger and they tracked down and fingerprinted through it. and said that Todd did that. Well, my question is, if he had two different pictures, where's the third picture? The one after he washed his face. I want to see all those scratches and marks that were supposed to be on his face, where the blood was coming from. But they took Todd over to the hospital at that point, and on the way over to the hospital, Todd made the statement probably a month later that while he was over by the hospital, that somebody, which I imagine was probably the chief of police or one of them, had called Bizet's or one of them on the big radio and says, "Well, it looks like you did her again, huh?" Well, it kind of sounds to me like he must have had somebody else a month or so before that they did the same thing to. But anyway, at that point, I never did get to talk to Todd for about 3 months, 4 months after that. But anyway, I had left, I told them while they were on the back porch, both Blizette's and Grace were standing there, and I told them, I says, well, I got to go to California, deliver a truck, and then after I delivered it, I got to turn around, fly over to Phoenix, pick up another one and bring it back. So it'll be about 4 days before I can get back. Well, I gets into Phoenix, and I've still got it on my cell phone, but anyway, I got a call from the Springfield City Police Department telling me that I had been subpoenaed to the grand jury for a testimony. Well, I told them I couldn't make it for less than 4 days. It was going to take me 3 to 4 days to get back because I was driving a truck, and that's DOT mandatory 11 hours driving, and that's it. Well, it would take me about 3 to 3.5 days to get back. I'm just guessing on that part, but I know it would take at least 3. But anyway, she says, well, I'll call you back. Well, she turned around, she called the DA, I guess, and they called back and said, no, you got to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, which actually, I don't think there would have been 8 hours that I could have been back, or would have had to been back. But anyway, I get back here and find out that the DA had gone on vacation just after that hearing that Monday. So that was the big rush, was to take and go on so he could keep his vacation time. I mean, why didn't he hold off on the other if he was good? It was such a rush. Why didn't he hold off on it until he got back the following week?
So what, they refused to let you be at the grand jury to testify about what the police did? That's what you're complaining about?
That's exactly my complaint. They refused, they basically, and then when I called them, they kind of gave me, well, he went on vacation, but he'll be back that Monday. And then when I called him... Right,
and anyway, you had a right to be there to complain that this was a false arrest and a false... They assaulted me, but the DA obviously had other things in mind. I mean, it wasn't just his vacation. It was, he did not even want you to be able to testify about the police and this false incident.
That's exactly what they didn't want me in there to testify about any of it, because of the fact you were my grandson. They'd probably figure out, oh, he'll tell anything. No, I tell it exactly as it happened. Just like the flashlight. They used the flashlight, they denied it. They said something was said by one of the gals up there that Todd reached for his gun. No, Todd didn't reach for his gun. And one thing and another. But anyway, after talking to him on that little incident, I kept trying to go to the police department and file a complaint against these 2 officers. Well, this one gal was going to take and fill out some papers, but she said I'd have to go to the sergeant. Well,
that's a misconduct report, right?
Right, that's a misconduct report. And I went down there, and she told me, well, you'll have to talk to the sergeant. Well, the sergeant wasn't there, so I had to come home. He called me, so I turned around and I told him, I says, I want to file a complaint against those 2. And anyway, they wouldn't let me. They would not accept that. And after I had done that, they turned around, they sent 4 or 5 cop cars over to the house. Their dog sniffing the front lawn as if I was passing drugs. But anyway, I tried that 3 or 4 different times, and every time I
Yeah,
did,
and you alleged that you were actually, you had told me that you felt you were being stalked by the police, that they were doing this just to harass you, coming around your house all the time. They were doing this to intimidate you and make sure you
that's
knew that you
exactly
were
what
being
they were
watched.
doing. They were trying to intimidate me, but every time I tried to file, which was 4 different times, I even took a private investigator down there over to the mayor's office when we went in and made a complaint there. But every time they would send at least 2 to 3 cop cars over to the house snooping around, and one time they told my wife, "Oh, we're looking for stolen vehicles," because I was out there moving trucks around the country for other people like Kenworth and Peterbilt and stuff like that. I'd be taking them off cross country because they'd been sold to somebody here or there. But when I got in there, they turned around and started making these big excuses. Well, anyway, the day of the trial came up, and they were pushing to get Todd to take a plea. Well, Todd's made that plea agreement because he wanted out of jail, and they were not going to take and let him out of jail. And anyway, his attorney, as far as I'm concerned, did him a real injustice in what he did. He got him out all right, but $8,500 to get him for the same thing that another guy was going to do for $5,000. He pays $8,500 for this one, and still gets the same thing he would have got then. And then at this point, they called me in, and they subpoenaed me in to the attorneys, or the attorney subpoenaed me in a month prior to when they went in the second time. But anyway, I went in and found out that, oh no, we're not going to hold it because the cop had gone on vacation. He went to Hawaii. So anyway, I go home, and then a month later, I'm subpoenaed in by the, what do you call them? The state. But anyway, I go up there to the courthouse, and I'm sitting there, and I'm told, well, you can't go down into the deal, but I'll be back. Well, my wife and I sat up there in the DA's office, or not the office, but in the hallway there, waiting to go to court. Well, the DA came to me and says, well, if you win, he says something about that if you win, he says, I'm going to have you up on that stand. And I said, bring her on. I says, I want to be there on that stand to testify. Well,
All right, well,
it didn't happen.
now let's talk about what's going on with this technology and stuff. Now, I allege I was set up by the state and the CIA. What do you have to say about that? I believe that the police were targeting me with a weapon and spying on me everywhere. Even when I had that apartment in 2010, they were listening to all my conversations on Facebook in my house, spying on me, using a weapon on me to keep me sick. What do you know about that? What the police have been doing to spy on me and do things to me in this state?
I have no idea what that's all about, but I said I can tell you this, that if you look up on Google, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff up there that's something similar, just like radar. Out here, you go down the street, you got radar units. They pick you up on it for speed violations and stuff using radar and such as this.
Yeah, so
same difference.
They have automated systems. Radar has, and it's interesting you bring that up because radar is actually just an imaging technique. They have microwave radar that gets seen here through the walls and see through objects and around objects. It's pretty interesting. So that's what you're bringing that up for.
Well, I've got no idea. All I know is that so much, and that's it. But you might as well shut her up because I'm done.
All right, and now the other night.
Let's get back to one thing. I will say that as far as all this other stuff goes, I did take and fill out a piece of paper giving it to Todd's attorney that was supposed to have been passed on to the DA, and Todd's attorney was supposed to have kept it. It was filing against these 2 police officers, just like this sergeant down there said. you go get an attorney. Well, it kind of looks to me like the chief of police needed an attorney instead of me.
Well, here's the funny thing is, if my attorney was never doing his job right, he was always misleading you, and he wasn't even working for us, was he? He was not even trying to expose what was going on.
To me, it would seem as though he must not have been listening too good, because he was going to the other side instead of following up on your side to fight for you.
Right, that was James Jagger. I had a multitude of attorneys. James Jagger, there was Becky Davis, that was a public defender. There was also John Halpern, he was a private attorney. Then there was Michael Boosman, a public defender, and Jessica Sadak, a public defender. Now the public defenders were actually working with the state and the CIA the whole time. And then the private attorneys, they just were refusing to work or do anything to investigate what was going on. Alright, I had a question. Now the other night, I caught someone following us in a car over to Wendy's. That was just a bizarre occurrence, wasn't it? Like a car drives up behind us. I say that we're being followed everywhere. This car shows up behind us, and he gets in behind us like he's going to order food. And then, as soon as we make a decision that we're going to leave without ordering food, he leaves without ordering food. Didn't you notice how bizarre that was?
Yeah, it was kind of bizarre, but I think he was probably just the same as we were. He probably didn't get what he wanted, or either that or they were...
Well, he didn't have time to talk to the restaurant, though. How would he know that? How would he not get what he wanted if he just decided to pull off as soon as we decided to leave?
That's true, too, because he did pull up to the speaker or the mic, and we pulled ahead, and he pulled up there, and then he backed out and was gone before I even knew it.
Yeah, it was weird, because see, we were sitting there, we were going to go through the drive-thru, and we were just going to go through it and just to get out of there because he pulled up, and then he suddenly backs out like he already knows that we were going to leave. It was weird.
All I know is that there's a lot of stalking that was going on ever since this whole thing started. And the police, every time I'd turn around and try to file, they'd take and stalk my house. They were out in Centennial Boulevard blocking Centennial. They were out there on Kelly Boulevard, 4 or 5 cops with a dog sniffing. A number of things. And then when I called in and talked to the chief, or whoever it was on the other end, he turned around and said something about that they were going to take and make sure he didn't get off, da. So I don't know.
All right, well,
I'm done.
Do you believe that you believe that the police might have a technology like I've alleged, but you just claim that you don't know enough about it, right?
I haven't got enough knowledge about that kind of stuff. Radar, fine, yes, I do. I do know that
what did that state police officer who did those polygraphs say to you? He told you that he'd read information about this.
He told my wife that, not me.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Mr. Giffen. You want to state your address for the record, where you live?
405 West Centennial Boulevard, Springfield, Oregon, 97477.
All right. Thank you.